and local politics, and taking a look at what is being covered both in the local press and internationally. And to kick us off, let's take a look at what's making headlines across the borders. And we're starting off this morning, as usual, with what's making headlines in Uganda. The paper is the Daily Monitor, and we're told on the front page of that paper that MP Adeke claims colleagues sexually harassed her on a trip. Take a look at that and find out what scandalous news is making headlines on their local political scene. They're also giving us a tally of the coronavirus infections in the region. Kenya is leading up with 110,356. Tanzania is still at 509 because they haven't been giving official data on how their infection rates are. Uganda is at 40,520. I do believe that's 49. And then we have Rwanda, 119,779. Then we're told right underneath that story about a male colleague assaulting this politician, police bosses under probe for stealing constables' cash. Take a look at the Daily Monitor to find out more about what's happening in Uganda and in the larger East African region. Speaking of the larger East African region, the Citizen from Tanzania is telling us Tanzania mulls overcharging WhatsApp calls due to falling revenue from international calls. The government is working out a plan that will see it charging WhatsApp calls in efforts to recoup the revenue it has been losing due to falling international trafficking charges. Take a look at that and see how that is going to pan out for this country. Well, quite interesting story there, because literally everyone has a WhatsApp app on their phone and they use it. So see what they have in terms of that and what possibly could be those charges that they're talking about. The Rwanda Today is telling us what's happening in Rwanda. Water bill leaves schools' coffers high and dry, and you do know that this is quite timely because there is a need for quite thorough hygiene given the coronavirus infections, and they just reopened their schools after feeling that they have a handle on the matter, and perhaps there is enough infrastructure for that, as pictured there on that page. For keeping students safe, schools ordered to set up their hand washing facilities and acquire temperature checking equipment at their own cost. Find out how they're dealing with the coronavirus, particularly when it comes to students in their local schools. Then the East African this morning is leading with EAC trailing in adoption of advanced tech. Now, UNCTAD estimates with this sector controls $350 billion market globally and forecasts a $3.2 trillion jump by 2025. Look at that and find out more. And when it comes to diplomacy, we're told right underneath this story on tech, Somali diplomat named IGAD. Could you scroll down and see what it says, the entire title? IGAD spokesman. Before his appointment, Noor worked as senior advisor at the office of the IGAD Special Envoy for the Red Sea, Gulf of Aden and Somalia. Then there's more news from Uganda. We are being told Uganda ministers to meet over Kenya maize ban. That story has had the entire region tongues wagging, and this follows the milk ban as well. Then let's take a look at the CNN last but not least and see what's making headlines internationally. We are told about even prisoners get fresh air inside Australia's Lucky Deep hotel quarantine system, as well as he clung to a tree for hours to escape death in Japan's worst natural disaster. Find out more. 10 years on, he is still rebuilding his life, and China lays out a 5-year tech master plan. Find out what's happening internationally. Check out the CNN and many other websites right there. So I've got you covered on the regions and the world. But locally, we have to take a look at what's making headlines. And it's all about politics, the coronavirus, the economy, and so much more. Even social issues are making headlines here. And joining me to have this discussion is Stephen Mwakesi, who's a public policy analyst, as well as Kariuki Ngunjiri, who is a political strategist. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And we start off with the biggest story that has made headlines since yesterday. That has to do with ODM leader Raila Odinga's health. We're told on the front page of the Standard what ails Raila, and they have there published a brief of what happened and what has been reported, but at the same time a letter that outlines his situation. So the letter reads, and this is from Mr. David L. Olunya, and this is a consultant neurosurgeon. It says Honorable Odinga walked in for a routine medical test at the Nairobi hospital on the 9th of March 2021. After feeling some fatigue, he has had a rigorous campaign and needed to have some checkup. This was carried out successfully. He's still undergoing some further investigations with a team of doctors that has been advised to take a rest. We're further told that we are continuing to monitor his condition, and no doubt he will be able to address the country in due course. He is in good spirits. And of course, the Standard is flagging some of those words that are being used: test, rest, monitoring, investigations. These are some of the words that the doctors have used to explain ODM leader Raila Odinga's condition yesterday after he was admitted to Nairobi hospital after a grueling campaign schedule. Far from that, or rather in the same light, we're having the Daily Nation this morning telling us Raila is out of danger. This is according to doctors. ODM leader family allay COVID-19 fears as his personal physician assures Kenyans that the former Prime Minister is in good shape. Odinga has, however, been advised to take a break from the grueling BBI campaigns. Mr. Mokesi, what do you make of this story and, of course, the attention that it has garnered through the time, all the way from the time it broke up to now?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think this story is extremely relevant at this particular point in our country because we are at a period whereby we are very expectant that being a party to the handshake agreement and being a principal in that particular arrangement, Right Honorable Raila Odinga would be leading the march from the front. And there was, we did see that immediately after the passing of the bill with the 24 counties, Prime Minister Raila Odinga took to the campaign trail. He did manage to show a presence in the Matungu by-election. Then he went to the coast. And there was a lot of belief that he will be leading from the front. But again, we have to be aware of two important issues. One, that is human, and two, is also aging with time. And so it's quite expected that after such rigorous events and the fact that we're also living during perilous times in this particular country, such an event would occur. I think what I would really appreciate from coming from Right Honorable Odinga is that he has taken the time to really make clear his health situation with the public. He's been very cheerful. If you look at his last Facebook post, he said he's been taking doctor advice and taking some rest time. I think the impact for many of the people who are watching him and also the ODM party at this particular juncture is the impact that this downtime has on the momentum that was gained by virtue of the county assemblies passing this particular bill. There was a lot of acrimony and cries from his stalwarts, people like Junet, Senator Orengo, who are saying that there are things which are bringing some hiccups to the handshake coalition. And you can see on Tuesday we all expected that there would be a huge party to celebrate the 3 years of the handshake, but nothing transpired, meetings did not happen, and so it does show you that there's still some trouble at the Hill, and now that the leader of the pack is actually indisposed, it shows that maybe the momentum might actually slow down. But it's a good moment for people like Gideon Moi. He's been really taking up the mantle of running with BBI all across the county, and I think this will continue to go on. There's also the public participation that's coming up within the two houses of parliament with regard to the BBI bill. So things will still go on, but it does have an impact on how we're looking at BBI going forward.
Right, and we have a quote here by Dr. Oburu Oginga, who says it shows a possible negative test, but I can't authoritatively confirm this because I'm not a medical doctor. You can reach Dr. Olunya for further details. He was talking about a test that has been done on the former premier on the COVID test. And of course, this is a concern given that we are facing a smack in the middle of a pandemic. What do you make of this story as we look at all the papers splashed with this story? ODM chief's family and personal doctor says he's in good shape and that he only needs to rest. Mr. Ngujiri.
Well, I think this case or this issue comes at a time when we have a contrast. Already, a president of a neighboring country who is believed to be John Pombe Magufuli is in the country for treatment, and yet the government of Tanzania has not explained to its citizen on what the president of the country could be having, or the issues that the president could be having.
Yes, and we'll get into that. But I'd like your opinion on this one first.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to say is that, of course, it is expected that Raila Odinga, being a public figure and one who the public has a lot of interest in, as their leader served as former prime minister, as a cabinet minister, and as a member of parliament, sometimes it is expected that, and unlike what other leaders, that is supposed to be at least open on some of these issues. Raila Odinga is, in this case, proving that he is not the same as what the other leaders have been doing, because anytime that he feels that he has an illness or is feeling sick, he'll always update the public. But then, now breaking it down to what we expect, and this being looked at the backdrop of what we expect in the BBI report, or rather in the BBI bill popularization campaign that was expected to kick off.
Right.
I expect that, like my friend has said, that this will scale down the activities because, of course, Raila Odinga being one of the proponents of that campaign, it is expected that because he has been advised to have a rest, that the activities that were planned will not happen as usual.
Okay.
Again, for the Orange Democratic Movement Party, which just this weekend was expected to hold a political rally at Kibra, it speaks to some of their internal organization mechanisms that perhaps they need to now reorganize themselves. Now that their captain has been advised to take a rest, what next for them? Because I believe as a political party, and we have heard them saying that the BBI is part of their agenda, expected that they are going to reorganize themselves and make sure that perhaps they step into what Raila Odinga has been doing. I don't know whether Wycliffe Oparanya and Governor Joho will be able to do that or will be able to take that mantle. However, we also expect, now that the BBI secretariat had been closed and we heard that there were dialogue, we can only create scenarios because perhaps, and like it has always been, it's difficult in Kenya to predict what will happen. So scenario one, assuming that the BBI campaigns were to go on, would that be differentiated from the aspirations, for example, of the internal party competition within ODM between Governor Joho, Oparanya, and those others that have expressed their interest to vie for the position of president in 2022. So which one will come first? Will they first settle for doing whatever they have said is their project, and that is BBI, or will they now come together and everybody will start bringing their own demands on the nominations of the presidential post? So that's something that perhaps we are going to be looking at. But I expect that people like Governor Joho, who have already made their case known, will not be turning back on this.
Absolutely. And in similar news, since you brought it up, allow you to finish your thought on it, that on President John Pombe Magufuli, who is missing amid fears of his hospitalization. The Standard has covered it on page 4. I could be wrong, but it looks like the nation has shied away from this one, or at least not given it as much prominence as the Standard. We're told here Tanzanian president, a fierce critic of COVID-19 containment measures, is claimed to to have been flown to a hospital in Nairobi. However, the Standard is quick to say that they cannot independently verify. They are unable to independently confirm these claims on the Tanzanian leader who has made headlines the world over for his stand on COVID-19 and how it needs to be handled. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it brings back to a history that we know in Tanzania. You can remember of the magic water that was being offered by
Lolion, I think it was Lolion,
the leader of Tanzania then. And you remember that the same application has been applied by President Magufuli. But I don't know what kind of argument he was relying on, because as far as I know, Magufuli is a professor of chemistry and sciences. He might have had a background on some of these issues. I know he must have studied biology, and he knows how the mutations of this virus and how perhaps it is important to rely on science to be able to apply as a curative measure to any problem or a preventive measure to any problem that arises in a health issue. So President Paul Magufuli did express a high degree of ignorance when he said that he doesn't believe COVID-19 exists, whereas even some of the greatest countries, the economic bigwigs of this world, for example, UK, the US, Germany, France, have already accepted that. WHO, already from the beginning, did express its concerns on how the Republic of Tanzania is approaching this COVID-19 issue. And those are experts who have been all through this. And now with the coming of the different variants of the vaccines, I think now there are 7, with different levels of efficacy. I think President Magufuli, if he has not done so, he should instruct those in his government, because now perhaps he is not able to act in his full capacity because of health concerns, as we are hearing. The Ministry of Health, the Prime Minister, or rather the ministers in Tanzania, should now start treating this disease with the seriousness that it deserves.
Okay.
I think for Magufuli, this is one of the most lowest moment, because if at all it is going to be confirmed that he was, for example, which is not substantiated yet, he was suffering from COVID-19. So what will he tell the people of Tanzania, being the leader of that country, yet having dismissed this disease from the onset? The other question is, how many people have died because of the negligence of the government on taking up measures like other countries are doing? I have seen you reading the number of cases that we have seen within East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And I want to congratulate our country and our government for being the most transparent.
Open,
I don't believe that the government of Rwanda, which has often been quoted as being a repressive state that does not allow free flow of information within its ecosystem, Kenya has over 100,000 cases from the data that you've seen. I don't actually believe that the country of Rwanda could be having that number, as well as the country of Uganda. So how does this data help in the combating of this disease? This is to apply caution and also advise the people of those specific countries that this disease is with us. And if you don't take care, it is going to bring us down. And for political transitions, it is going to have a very apocalyptic consequence on, for example, the transition of government of John Pombe Magufuli. This is ile tunasema mwiba wa kujidunga.
Okay. Mr. Mwakesi, do you believe or are you of the opinion that this situation in Tanzania is displaying the foolishness of the Maji rebellion, as Mr. Ngunjiri has pointed out, and at the same time, is it hypocritical that the president might be in the country seeking treatment and he's leading a nation that obviously not all of them could fly out to get treatment for COVID-19, if it is true that he has it and is in the is hospitalized in the country?
I think this is a case whereby we are also dealing with a lot of innuendos, rumors, and we're not quite clear what exactly is transpiring. But again, as was previously mentioned, the issue here is a question of transparency. We are not quite clear because for the last 2 weeks, there's been close monitoring of the Tanzanian government and the presence of His Excellency Magufuli, and he has not been found to be in the public domain over the past 2 weeks.
And if he's well, then why wouldn't he come out to deny? He's quite vocal when it comes to things like this.
And yesterday, the information minister went out and said, you know, it cautioned the public against making insinuations that the health of the president. But the reality remains that the lack of transparency by the Tanzanian government with regard to this particular pandemic is what is extremely wanting, because we are not able to really assess the efficacy of the government in terms of how they've been able to handle the cases as have been appearing within that particular country. The country reopened its borders to international travel the earliest as compared to the rest of the other countries in the East Africa region. And I think the first variant of the COVID pandemic as it appeared was first spotted in Tanzania. And the fact that there were loose borders explains why even there is a sudden outburst in the numbers. We are now at 14% positivity rate in the country. So I think it's important going forward that Tanzania relooks at how it approaches issues that have far-reaching impact across their borders and how they affect even their neighboring countries. And the fact that possibly the head of state from Tanzania could be seeking medical treatment in Kenya is an indictment, one, on their health system as a country, and two, the approach to containing the measures. Funnily enough, when you look at all the countries within the EAC, Tanzania remains the one country whereby the top political leaders would still appear to the public not wearing any masks, not encouraging the public to follow COVID protocols. And at the same time, you'll find that on their TVs, there are adverts telling people that they should take corona seriously. I think they ignored it at the period was because the president was facing a re-election campaign. And I think when he looked at the possibility of having to lock down a country during a re-election, they came up with all manner of excuses and saying that they're testing lungs of pundas and all manner of things there and fruits to be able to discredit COVID-19 tests. But now the indictment has come, the chicken have come to roost. It's now clear that it's important that they had played ball with the rest of the world in terms of looking at containing COVID-19.
Yeah, and speaking of COVID-19, I'd like to draw your attention to page 16 of the Daily Nation this morning. They have an illustration there that is showing the waves of the coronavirus. There's the first wave there, the second wave, and the third wave seems to be coming in with all manner of politicians right there. I don't know what you would make of the implication here. If you've seen that cartoon this morning, I'd like your opinion on it. But at the same time, on page 4 of the Standard, we're told ICU facilities in city are full as third COVID-19 wave hits the country. Mr. Ngunjiri, what do you make of this?
First of all, when you look at what the WHO, World Health Organization, has been able to tell us, is that already they are in the process of creating another 200 vaccines for this particular disease. However, they caution the populace of this world that it is not going to be as what we expected now that the vaccine has come. They caution that everybody must not stop wearing masks and social distancing and taking other measures that have been given by the respective health ministries in different countries. So this begs the question, why are we being vaccinated against the coronavirus, yet even the highest body in the world that stands for these health issues tells us that it is not clear whether this vaccine would fully protect an individual from ever getting the disease again.
But then isn't it better than nothing?
The issue here is if we have a vaccine for this disease, it should have been direct and automatic, that this would have prevented, just like we take the polio vaccines, just like we take other vaccines as young kids. So what is the need for having a vaccine that is not effective and putting the lives of people in danger? Because what is much expected now is that people are going to relax, and it is natural. And human beings, once they have had a remedy to a problem of this magnitude, is expected that those that will be vaccinated, either through ignorance or by not caring, it's expected that they are going to relax their prevention or preventive measures to this disease. So this is one of the gaps that I think the World Health Organization is supposed to look at, as well as the respective ministries, because the 7 vaccines could have been the most urgent thing that we required to bring a solution to all this and take us back to normality.
But from what we know, I'd like you to weigh on this. Don't you think there's a level of efficacy, and like I asked you earlier, that is better than completely nothing, just allowing things to go on as it is?
Now,
there has to be some benefit to all these vaccines.
Yes, of course, there are benefits, and that we are in concurrence. However, I want to ask a specific question, and perhaps some of the health experts that we have in the country should answer this question. Yes, we agree that this vaccine is going to bring a level of efficacy, but if the World Health Organization is not sure of the level of preventive degree that this vaccine brings in a human body, so is it clear that, for example, we are going to go back to our normal activities, for example, the normal rescheduling of meetings and everything, for what time and up to when shall we be in this? Is this going to be that forever and ever we will always be wearing masks? Forever and ever we will always be social distancing? Can we and I'm not trying to question the efforts that have been applied by scientists across the world to do this job. They have done a fantastic job. But what I'm just trying to ask is, everybody is in a confusion. What is the need for this vaccine at this time that will come and confuse normal Kenyans, for example, or people in Africa, and especially down here, sub-Saharan Africa, where the level of poverty is very high? People will drop the guard and start doing the activities that they used to do before, ignoring science and information that this, how many will care that the vaccine does not bring the efficacy that it's supposed to bring in a normal scenario? Right. Another thing, you asked me about the number of politicians on that Standard newspaper. You see, those are the people that are on the limelight, and it is expected that any time that a disease has struck or a calamity has struck, those people that have always been seen in the public domain, then it is expected that they are some of the notable figures that will be quoted forever in history, having unfortunately gone down to this pandemic. But how many Kenyans in society every day die
suffering,
without their names appearing on newspapers? So the greatest caution that Kenyans can have, now that science is not giving us 100% remedy to this, is only to be their own keepers and their brothers and sisters' keeper, and then rely on their God. Hapa ni hatuna nguvu na hatuna uwezo, because of course the vaccine, like we are being told, will not bring 100% efficacy to...
Mr. Ngunjiri, I do believe the government has been very emphatic to the people, telling them this does not mean that you need to discard those safety measures, and you need to make sure that you need to be aware that this does not mean you are safe. The fact that immunization has started. We are in the first wave. There's so much more that has made headlines. I'll get to you, Mr. Mokesi, on the other side of the break on the third wave of the coronavirus infections. But for now, let's take a short break. On the other side, we keep analyzing what's making headlines today.
This is KTN News. Introducing Ushindi Cream Bar Soap. It foams well, is gentle on skin and hands, and cleans your clothes and dishes well too. Available in 1 kg and 800 gram bars and 175 gram tablets. Also available in all your favorite variants. Ushindi, a quality product from Pwani Oil Products Limited.
Cheki, Kenya inanid at least 1 million blood donations kila mwaka. Hii inamaanisha kila 2 minutes kuna mtu ananid blood transfusion mahali. Sana sana kina mama na watoi newborn ndio wako kwa risk kubwa zaidi. Usikubali wapoteze lives zao na unaweza donate blood. Download app ya Damu Sasa leo kwa Google Play Store upate more info please unaweza donate na other benefits. Mazeto klezea tuokoe lives za Wakenya wenzetu.
Your Saturday just got much better. It's a reggae sports bonanza on the Set Piece Show. We bring you the good.
Lillard, long range three, and it's good!
Bossy. The bad.
And so Arsenal have been reduced to 10 men. David Luiz dismissed.
And the magnificent.
The first man to run a marathon in under 2 hours.
Okay. We guarantee you more stats, more stories, more sports, and even more reggae. With the host, Moses Wahisi, Robinson Okenye, Steve Njuguna, Dennis Masinde, and DJ Pati. Every Saturday from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Vibes Radio.
Vibes Radio, the home of reggae.
Wakenya wamekuwa naulizia Baba Zero yuko wapi?
Mimi niko hapa. I'm taking my time to enjoy the finer things in life.
Na Zizi alienda wapi?
Mimi nimekuwa nafanya muziki kwa miaka 21 sasa hivi.
Kuimba ni kazi yangu, ni kipaji changu.
Niwaachia watu siasa, siingili.
Mimi niliingia bunge tukiwa tunapata mshahara ya shilingi 10,000.
Kalembe ajui kizungu labda napewa Tanzania ambassador.
Ni kurapie kidogo ama ni sirabu?
Rap kabisa.
March 12th, 2020.
The Ministry of Health has confirmed the first coronavirus case in Kenya.
Life as we know it turned upside down. The pandemic ushering in a season of panic, pain, and anguish.
There will be a daily curfew from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m.
As Kenya marks 1 year of the pandemic, watch COVID at 1, starting Sunday, 7th March, only on KTN News. This is KTN News.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and we are reviewing the press and seeing what's been prioritized locally. And with me is Stephen Mwakesi, who's a public policy analyst, as well as Kariuki Ngunjiri, who's a political strategist. And we were on the matter of the third wave of the coronavirus. Mr. Ngunjiri feels that there is no need to confuse the people, the masses, with a vaccine. That's not 100%. I wonder what you make of this, Mr. Mwakesi.
Trix, you know, I think the reality of a vaccine is that it is a preventative measure.
Yes.
As is social distancing, as is wearing of a mask. And so
just
right
one more
now,
weapon in our arsenal.
Yes, we now have a new additional weapon on our arsenal, which is the vaccine. The AstraZeneca vaccine has been said to be around 75% efficacious when it comes to dealing with containing or preventing one from contracting the virus. So having this and arming especially the frontline workers, people who are directly in contact with persons who may have the virus, is one way to actually prevent the rapid spread of the virus amongst the populace. I'm glad to hear that yesterday the CS Mwangangi mentioned that Kenya is about to receive a grant of about 25 million doses of the vaccine, which are going to be distributed to the Kenyan public. So for me, I find that considering the amount of fatigue that has been with the Kenyan populace by virtue of the containment measures, the requirements that have been put in place, a vaccine does provide the populace some ability to say that they have some measure of protection against the virus.
Yeah.
I think it's something that should be welcome. I know there are a lot of people who have reservations on the use of the vaccine. There's been a campaign which was issued, I think earlier this week we saw a statement by the Catholic doctors who are completely opposed to the use of the vaccine on the Kenyan populace, which was countered by the Catholic Bishops Association,
yes,
as well as the Catholic Church, making clear that both popes, the emeritus Pope Benedict and the current Pope, have been vaccinated. And so this is something that will continuously become a debate all across the world, even within this country. This was a debate even in South Africa, to a point whereby the government even stopped the issue of vaccinations so that the public could really debate whether it is something that they should be able to subject their citizens to. So in my view, I think vaccination is a personal choice.
Yes.
The government has not said it's mandatory for people to be vaccinated. Should you feel that you do not want to be a part of the vaccination exercise, you can opt out. But if you feel like it is something that you should be able to be subjected to, please go ahead and be a part of it. It is encouraged from the point of public health perspective that as many Kenyans take the vaccine as possible. But those who feel that it goes against their personal comfort, I think they can be allowed to stay out. But then again, this disease, once it hits you, it's not kind at all. It's quite a very harsh disease.
Yeah, and in that same line, Mr. Ngunjiri, you can respond and couple it with a response to this other story where governors want political rallies banned as COVID cases increase. County chiefs call for a 30-day ban on political gatherings. And of course, this also is implying, in another story in the Standard, it's being implied that this might mean that there shall be a tightening of those measures that have been put in place to fight coronavirus. So for those who are hoping that the curfews will be done away with, that might not be something that's happening soon.
Yes, Trix, you see, there is a conflict between the objective measures that have been put in place, of course, relying on science, and the subjective crisis of this vaccine in terms of efficacy. What we are saying is the government should invest very, 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 very heavily on a campaign that will also educate the people and sensitize them on up to which level this vaccine can be able to prevent you rather from the COVID-19. The people must know that by dropping the guard, by not observing social distance, by not wearing masks, even when you have been injected with this vaccine, there is still a possibility of you getting the disease. That must be made clear to Kenyans, and it must be repeated as much as possible. That's one.
Yeah.
Two, on the issues of governors asking for the banning of political rallies, I think in Kenya, politicians rather are held in high esteem, unlike in other societies, for example, in the West, of course, which is expected because they have had different phases of evolution in terms of their political ecosystem growth. But then, why is it only that politicians are the ones that want to, or rather want to give us what should happen, yet they are the ones that have been going against these COVID rules? I think it is important, and as we speak about, for example, what is supposed to have happened, we expected that the BBI rallies would have been reopened. I don't know up to which point that has gone, but then it will disenfranchise some people within the political circles. And I'm sure, like you've heard in the past, you heard them saying that COVID-19 cannot prevent people from converging and meeting and talking about the destiny of this country. That we've heard from politicians.
Yes.
And they said that political rallies and those meetings must continue. We are asking at this point, is it now that they have seen we are supposed to now uplift our standards towards the prevention of this disease until this time when you've had over 100,000 cases? What has changed? So what we are supposed to do, and I feel this is supposed to be imperative even for the president as he makes his speech. I feel that society cannot, for example, rely on those rumors and those misinformations that we've heard from politicians. If at all the president is going to reopen the country, is going to mean that Kenyans, at least a greater percentage of those that interact with the economy every day, those that wake up, go to work, teachers, those that go into the markets, will be able to offer themselves for the vaccination and yet continue with taking those preventive measures. But then if the president also, on the other hand, decides that he's not going to reopen the country fully, then it means that we are now going back to readjust ourselves into, or rather adapt into the, for example, constraints that you've had. You've had a problem within the economy because it is not working fully. Then, and yet we speak of the political, financial, and health responses to this. So we will be taking a political stand, being politically correct or otherwise, and health remedies to this. However, we will now strain ourselves again on the or rather on the financial crisis that has been in this country, and you can already see what is happening within the circles of, or the relationship of Kenya and the International Monetary Fund.
Okay, and in similar news, on the back page of the Daily Nation, we're told KEMSA supplier forgets bank accounts, and that has to do with that grilling that was happening yesterday. And we are told also that 1,000 is the number of Killing Limited shares transferred to Ms. Ivy Onyango Minyou by Mr. Collins Bush Wanjala. Now, the Standard is also featuring this story right here, and I'll read an excerpt. She needed 2 days to consult before making full disclosure about bank accounts belonging to that Killing Limited, as well as signatories. This remark stunned the members of the Public Investment Committee, as she is the sole director of the company, which was awarded 4 billion shillings worth of tender for the procurement of 450,000 PPE at 9,000 per unit. At some point, she ended up having a heated exchange with the members of that committee because she needed 5 minutes to consult, and even after the consultation, she came back and insisted that she needed more time to actually get those details that she was being asked for. But the implication that is what was ruffling the feathers of the committee members, was that she might be hiding other members, other people who are part and parcel of what is essentially a scam. Now, Mr. Mwakesi, what do you make of this story?
I think the investigation or the public inquiry into what transpired in KEMSA with regard to the COVID-19 procurement is something that has really gripped the interests of this country. However, we are seated at a place whereby we have to balance what private interest, what they can be able to share to the public, and how far a parliamentary committee can reach in terms of getting information on what's transpiring within a company and the decisions that are being made. But I think what has to be very clear is that every Kenyan citizen has a responsibility to be transparent and accountable to institutions that have been set up by the Constitution for purposes of ensuring that there is no loss of public money when it comes to things like this, like public procurement, such as the one that we experienced under KEMSA. This Parliamentary Watchdog Committee has a very tedious task ahead of them because, again, the nature of these structures and the companies, the way they were structured before the rule came in January for having the beneficial owners of companies actually made clear, is that people were able to set up companies, set up proxies and put them in charge of the companies, even allow them to control the bank accounts, but in the end, somebody else calls the shots. And I don't think even with that requirement of ultimate beneficial owners will prevent such things from happening in future. Right. I think what we need to really inculcate within our public and populace is that whenever any entity engages in activities such as the one that we saw, whereby public money was squandered and even tenders issued at will and at wanton and even without due regard to process, that there will be serious repercussions that will come out of it.
Yes, but I do believe there's a giant loophole there because it's not a crime, whether you're a proxy or not, to actually go for a tender and get it. So I think the biggest headache that this committee is having is figuring out how to bring to book people who are basically, allegedly, or rather, as has been implied by this and many other articles, proxies, people who are not necessarily, it's not a crime to get a tender, basically. So how do you net them?
Indeed. I mean, at the end of the day, the responsibility is on the state agencies to be able to actually investigate and find out where does this money go. We saw this in the case of NYS, whereby it did not matter that these parties were proxies. They eventually, them and their families and everyone else who could potentially benefit from whatever activity was had taken place, they were put to book and their assets were tagged and even recovered by the state. I think these measures need to be instituted and really entrenched in the manner in which we do business in this country, so that people will refuse to take up the role of being a proxy to a company that you do not have any say or control over. So that we are, the moment you are called a proxy, it means that for the rest of your life, you will be terrorized by the fact that you carried out an exercise that...
Mr. Mokese, you're putting too much faith in their conscience. Mr. Ngunjiri, what do you make of this story? There were various partners, she says, that entered into joint ventures with her. I think there is an Equity bank account, an SBM bank account. I would request that you allow me more time to consult so that I can have a basis for certain disclosures. What do you make of that apparent ignorance about her own bank accounts?
Well, I think this KEMSA issue is a whole cartel ecosystem, an echo chamber that you cannot be able to discern very easily, as we have seen from the evidence that was presented, for example, in Parliament, and the level of commitment from the members of the parliamentary committee. So from my side and from what I believe, I think that these are some of the issues that and the challenges that we have in an economy such as Kenya, whereby various people, even those that are supposed to investigate some of these things, will try and delay the process, bring bottlenecks here and there, try and cover up their colleagues within either the public service sector or whichever, because these people know each other. And this brings to the fore the question of whether we can rely on our public institutions. Kenya is a poor society, it is a poor country, but can't we be able to govern ourselves with the standards of at least of a growing economy and uplift ourselves to a level that public servants will be able to exercise transparency, as my colleague said, whereby it doesn't mean that you have to be followed for you to be transparent, as long as you are in public service. Again, we have a very, very, very bad culture whereby we have an argument of people saying that because I did this business and I followed the procurement process as it was supposed to be, however, even if I was having a conflict of interest or I was given this tender because I'm a friend to someone, then I think we are going into the wrong direction. We must fight political patronage tricks. And this is what is ailing our economy as part of the problems that we speak of corruption. Even if sometimes we have people arguing that corruption is not an impediment to development, to some extent which is true, because it is a convenience part of bureaucracy in various governments and how the state is programmed. I think that people must hold themselves in high regard as public servants. I have a lot of doubts in our institutions. How many days were, for example, the EACC given to investigate issues of KEMSA? Do we have a report on the same? What action has been taken? So this demotivates the Kenyan populace and also depletes them and lowers their public confidence on institutions such that there will be impersonal application of either the law, public policy or otherwise, whereby we don't need to keep on following some of these processes so that work can be done. And this is a problem that we have in society. We have a problem in people agreeing to do their job as it's supposed to be, and also agreeing to being part of these problems as opposed to being part of the solutions.
Okay, now tucked away on the bottom right of that corner of that page 12 for the Standard, is Malala and staff set free on 14.2 million bond shillings. That's the Kakamega Center, Cleophas Malala, and 7 members of his staff that were yesterday slapped with that particular bond. You can take a look at that and find out more. Then, the last we shall speak of the COVID-19 situation in the country. You have a spread on page 6 and 7 that's giving us all the figures and a very well, they are honoring those who have been lost and remembering the departed souls and families in search of closures. Talking about closure, and a psychiatrist here is advising those who lost their loved ones to corona to conduct church services in their honor and plant flowers at grave sites as a healing process. So take a look at that and see what you can learn about the souls, the heroes that have been lost. Many of these are medics and who died in the line of duty. Now, as we move far from politics and the coronavirus, there's an interesting one here. It is a developing one. Kenya backtracks on maize import ban as traders protest. Kenya restricts a purchase of produce from Tanzania and Uganda over claims of food safety. They said that this has the goods had been measured and found to have very large doses of aflatoxin leading to acute poisoning that can be life-threatening to those who consume it. Aflatoxin comes up with a poor storage of maize due to excessive moisture, and of course when it's consumed it actually can lead to even death. So when you see this, Mr. Mwakesi, what comes to mind?
I think there's a balance that the government is trying to have. What the Food and Agriculture Authority said in their release and their request to the KRA to stop the imports of maize from Tanzania and Uganda was that it is a safety issue. That there was a problem that they do not believe that the maize that is coming into the country will be safe for human consumption. But our neighbors, both Tanzania and Kenya, read that it is a
trade war.
Yes, and what they call the non-tariff barriers that are being put up by the Kenyan government to stop these people from being able to export into the country. Already you can tell from the border in Malaba, there's a lot of maize that has been piled up by the Ugandan traders who are not able to access the Kenyan market because of it. And indeed, this would become an issue between the two countries, or the three countries for that matter. I think for Kenya, Kenya, this is something that we need to honestly have a clear debate on. And we need to have extreme clarity about the measures that are being taken and how they impact on our neighbors, especially when it comes to maize. Maize has been a very controversial issue in this particular country, whether it is from a local market perspective, whereby the pricing and the amount of money that farmers get from each bag of maize is something that has been quite controversial and an issue. But however, even as Kenya takes these measures, I think the question that we should be asking is, do we have enough supplies on our own to be able to weather this storm of having to shut our borders to Tanzania and Uganda?
Yes, but we have to remember what they're alleging is in the maize is something that could kill, something that is harmful. So when we are backtracking on certain things that have been put in place, what's the thinking behind that? Because I do imagine is because they have revealed that this maize has large doses of aflatoxins. Does this mean that suddenly it is not there, or does it mean that we shall continue on consuming maize that could be harmful to our health? I mean, what do they mean? You
see, what they're saying is that, look, Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania cannot bring their maize here because it has extremely high levels of aflatoxin.
Yes.
Fine. So then that means what? Because that maize would have come into the country, it would have been able to find market, it would have gone to millers, it would have been able to permeate into the Kenyan public. However, my question is, do we have a safety gap now that we have blocked this maize from these particular two countries? Because we are supposed to have a strategic grain reserve. Do we have enough that will be able to cater to us in the event that we're not able to receive these particular stocks? Or are we setting ourselves...
Is bad maize better than no maize? Perhaps, because this is maize that has been flagged as poisonous, basically.
The moment you say that there's a health safety concern, that's done. We should not even allow it into the country.
Exactly.
The question then comes in, what do we have as a remedial measure? Because my problem is that we might be able to say we have stopped this. We have said it is not allowable. Do we have an alternative to making sure that Kenyans actually do not starve or lack the ability to access maize flour because of this particular measure? This is the question for concern. So for me, I would really urge, like, for example, the government, the Treasury, and especially the Ministry of Agriculture, to make clear that, yes, in as much as we have shut down the borders for imports of maize from these particular two countries, Kenya is safe. We are able to feed our people over this duration of time. What I also anticipate is that probably we might get another import of maize, but not from these particular two countries. In the event that happens, the two countries might actually read a sinister motive that maybe our intent all along was to import maize from a separate country other than the two. Again, the argument, if we read from the traders who are coming from both Tanzania and Uganda, is that Kenya is attempting to put a non-tariff barrier. They've said for years they've been exporting their maize into Kenya.
And that is the big question now that comes to the fore, Mr. Ngunjiri. Is it what's the truth basically? Is it that there are large doses of aflatoxin, or is it that Kenya has ulterior motives and therefore this would be a real threat to diplomatic relations with our neighbors?
Well, I think Kenyans first of all should understand that these relations have to be kept healthy at all times, and part of the process of keeping these relations healthy, one of them is trade.
Even if they are selling us poison?
Let me just advance the argument so that you can understand me. So, we see interrelations between countries, not only within the EAC, but even within other trade, for example, trade blocks. You talk about COMESA, you talk about ECOWAS, or which other blocks that we have in Africa, for example. You see, most of the times, people misunderstand, for example, that in a country like Kenya, we need to import maize from Tanzania just because we are having a deficit of the same maize here. No, it is not the case. Most of the times, we could import maize from Uganda so that we can continue having an interrelation between country to country. We could also be having several strategic interests in Uganda that, for example, we need our banks, for example, like the Equity Bank or whichever other interests that we have in Uganda, either within the financial sector or in the public sector. We could be doing some of these things, not because we need maize in Kenya as an import from another country, but just because there could be other underlying issues that we need to maintain between us and Uganda and Tanzania. Because I am not convinced that Kenya has a problem or has a shortage of maize, to import maize from Uganda and Tanzania.
Even to begin with.
Yes, that is what I believe in the first point. The other point is, we know that there has been strained relations between Kenya and, for example, a country like Tanzania. Of course, they are going to read malice in anything that we do that disadvantages them in one way or the other, either trade or otherwise.
Yeah.
But what can we do when we are confronted in a situation whereby we need to control the number of bags of maize that are coming into the country, so that we can be able to allow our local farmers to get an improved incentive in terms of prices? What can we be able to do to control things that are being brought into the country, so that the local manufacturers can be able to play freely with the Kenyan market? This is also the same case like the coffee that we export rather to Britain, because in Britain they have a shortage and they have a problem with the climate. They cannot be able to grow, for example, the kind of tea that, the quality of tea that we are growing here in Kenya. So that's why they require us to import many tons of coffee to their country. But it's not the same application, like, for example, is supposed to happen to something that is staple in the country like Kenya, called maize. So it depends with what we are talking about. And I think sometimes the government can apply hard power even to some of these countries.
Hard power?
Yes, hard power.
Explain to our viewers what you mean by that.
By hard power, yes. I mean cutting off some of this stuff without any explanation, or even if you understand how a state operates tricks, or how a state is in its complexity. So sometimes some of these things are done to, it could be quoted that there is aflatoxin in the maize.
Yes.
But there's something that is being controlled here. That is to be able to liberalize the Kenyan market in terms of making sure that the common farmer here in Kenya is able to sell their maize in the market without having a competitive price from the ones that are coming from other countries. Why do we import eggs, for example, from Uganda? Yet we have the same climatic conditions with that country. So some of these things have to be looked into the prismatic angle, and the respective cabinet ministers, for example, in agriculture, the Minister for East African Community, there are some of the things that we are supposed to be respected on, especially as a leading economy in East Africa.
Mr. Mokesi, I mean, even as we talk about this and the funny trade that we have, that of even goods that we already have, I mean, isn't there a way that those in authority can figure out better ways of trading so that we are not even having those surpluses, so to speak?
You know, to contextualize this issue, in terms of maize and what we have, Kenya has a demand of about 50 million bags of maize every year. But we only produce about 40 million bags every particular year. So there's usually a deficit of about 10 to about 12 million bags that we do not have as a country. One of the ways to remedy that is to increase production of maize as a country, and you can see that from projects like Galana Kulalu and so many others that the government has been insistent on trying to activate. But then the deficit can only be remedied by looking at our neighbors. Now, the thing that the ESC has been trying to do is to try and ensure that the standards in which maize is grown, stored, and even transported into neighboring countries, the standards are well maintained and kept. Now, the moment that the Kenyan Bureau of Standards or even the Food and Safety authorities realize that the maize coming from Uganda and Tanzania does not meet the necessary quality for human consumption in Kenya, then it behooves the government to actually put in place mechanisms to stop that. So I think it is incumbent upon the ESC member countries to ensure that we enlighten our farmers on good agricultural practices and also good storage practices that makes this maize to be fluid to move across the borders without an issue as we are encountering right now. But as you've rightly said also on the issue of other products, because already there's been a lot of complaint. The Ugandan government has raised a complaint to the Kenyan embassy and especially the Foreign Affairs, complaining about the issue of not being able to export chicken products and egg products into the country and even milk products into the country. I think there was a consignment of milk that was held by the Kenyan government when it tried to come into the country. I think it's time that we really looked at as a country, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to make products to be cheaper for the consumer, or are we trying to be protectionist of our own producers? It's very important that we look at the consumer first. And when you consider the consumer, we want them to get commodities at the cheapest available price. Now, what does that mean? If somebody is able to move their eggs from Uganda and reach into Mathioya,